Hi, I'm Kent Vaughn with Blaze Performance Solutions.
And I'm David Williams. And at Blaze Performance Solutions, we believe that complexity is at the center of the world's most significant challenges.
I couldn't agree more, David. Complexity causes Americans to work among the longest hours of any advanced economy. We're time starved, busy, and frankly disengaged at work. At BPS, we specialize in simplification. Simplification truly is the competitive advantage that allows you to be more innovative, more adaptable, and to thrive. Now, with that in mind, today we want to welcome you to this session of the Blaze Leadership Academy. We call it Communication That Works. Now, when you think about communication, what we believe is that the single biggest problem with communication is the assumption it occurred. Now, think about it. How many times have you tried so diligently to explain something to someone or describe a process or an issue to someone? And later on, it seems like you were almost speaking a different language because they certainly didn't seem to get what you said. Now, with that in mind, when do you struggle the most with having effective, powerful communication? Hey, David, what about you?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is that if I find myself being emotionally charged, if you will, in a conversation, when I'm letting the emotions get the best of me, I struggle with effective communication. People are hearing my voice, but the communication is not very effective.
Well, I struggle with that same thing. Another time when I really struggle with communication is late at night. After about 10 or 10:30, it's like my brain turns off. And I sometimes have to just coach myself and say, okay, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Just go to bed. So when I'm tired, another one is I don't think I was this way when I was younger, but I think I tend to get a little hangry sometimes.
Mhm.
When I'm hungry and I start to get a little frustrated, it's like, yeah, I haven't eaten in a while. I probably ought to eat something. So uh, here's what we'd like you to do. Take just a moment, put this recording on pause, and write down when are some times when you tend to struggle the most with effective communication. When is it? You're hungry, you're tired, you're what, or is it when you've explained this to them before and they still don't seem to be getting it? I remember when I was stationed in Germany in the Army many years ago, that a lot of people, especially in the US, when they were talking to someone who's from Germany, where I lived, they felt like if they spoke a little louder and a little slower, that the person would get it. And, I find I do that sometimes myself here in the United States. And you know what? Louder and slower isn't usually the answer.
Yeah, that's right.
It really isn't usually the answer. So today we're going to talk about communication from really three different perspectives. We're going to talk about, the words we use. I'm just using dog as a word, right? We're going to talk about a process called Halt, an acronym. And then finally, we're going to talk about getting your point across and a tool that we call a conversation planner that you should have a copy of electronically. Or if you don't, you can write it out. It's not a big deal. We'll show it to you on the screen. So let's start with the first one, this idea that the words mean different things. So we're going to talk about a couple of really simple words we're all familiar with. And when I say this word, I'd like you to write down two or three things that come to your mind when I say the word. And I'm going to ask David to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing. So the word I'm going to say is dog. Dog. When I say dog, write down two or three things that come to your mind. Okay, that wasn't a long time, but I wrote down three words, David, and I hope to not offend our studio audience by these three words. But what did you write down? What did you think about when you thought the word dog?
Well, the first word that came to mind is actually named Sparky. That was the name of my first dog that I ever had growing up as a little kid, right? So Sparky was the first word that I wrote down.
Okay, the first word I wrote down was hairy.
Not Harry the name, but a dog being furry and hairy.
Furry, and there's hair everywhere. Yeah, I visited friends. You sit on their couch. You leave and there's hair all over your navy blue pants or jacket. Okay, what else did you write down, David?
So Sparky was a poodle. So that was the second word that I wrote down was poodle. So Sparky and poodle.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because we had a neighbor for years. They've now moved, but they had a Great Dane. And
Mm.
whenever somebody would walk by with their Great Dane, I would say, how's your horse doing today? Because it was huge, it was gargantuan. So I wrote down horse because it's
That's
huge. It's
good.
the Great Dane's huge. Okay. Did you write anything
Yeah.
else down, David?
Yeah, and the third one was Ollie. That's the name of our next door neighbor's dog. It's a beautiful Labradoodle and a personality that just doesn't stop. So that was the third one that I wrote down was Ollie.
Awesome. So see, our experiences with dogs are very different, and I wrote down loud because I have a neighbor behind me that their dog barks a lot. And you're like, really? I mean, what is this? I mean, you just keep going on and on and on. So compare what you wrote down, you and our studio audience. There are people that are watching this recording as well. What did you write down when you thought about dog? Was the name? Was it a type of dog? Who knows what it was, right? But I'd be willing to bet that just as David and I, who have known each other for nearly 2 decades and been business partners for years, just as we wrote down very different things, you probably wrote down different things as well. Now, here's what's so important about that. If it's something as simple as a dog and we write down different things, what about some of the other words that aren't so simple? But hey, let's try another word. So let's write down boat. So what we'd like to do is just what we did before. Write down 2 or 3 things that come to your mind. I'm gonna do the same thing when you think of boat, and let's see what we all came up with. See what that word means to us. All right, David, what did you think? What came to your mind when you thought of boat?
So yeah, the first thing that came to my mind, I wrote it down, was Marine Corps transportation.
Being a Marine, you would think very differently about it. The boat. See, to me, I thought of boat as fun. I wrote fun. You weren't thinking about fun. Okay, what else did you write down?
Battleship Gray. Battleship Gray, which I know is a color you really hate.
Yeah,
But
oh, I do not like that color. Yeah. So, yeah. So yes. So it's funny. My second one was money. My best friend says boat really is an acronym for bring out another 1,000.
That's good. Yep.
All right. What else you write down, David?
And the third one I wrote down was wet. The word wet.
Wet. Yeah. Well, and when you're in a Marine Corps uniform and got all your regalia on, wet is not a good way to be.
Yeah, and you can probably tell I got some emotional issues when
Yeah, I
it
got some
comes
emotional issues with
to
boat. Yeah, that's why I was in the Army. I always said to you, I was in the Army. I want to stay on the ground. You were a Marine, right out in the water. The last thing I wrote was family because it was always fun with our family
How
being on a
about that?
boat. So, isn't it interesting, everyone that's watching this, how a word as simple as boat can mean such different things to people, such different things to people, and isn't it a wonder why communication is difficult? Because the words, even though we speak the same language, maybe that we don't speak the same language, right? But we do speak the same language in this case, right? How that same word can engender different kinds of feelings and emotions and ideas. And here we think we are describing it so well, and yet we're not. Why? It's not your fault or their fault. It's because, frankly, the words mean very different things,
Mhm.
even the same words. What would
Yep.
you add to that, David?
No, I mean, I think it's a great exercise to even show how life experiences help shape the definition of the word, right? So we have these different life experiences that come into play when it comes to effective communication, how what we've experienced in our past has a direct impact on what we're hearing and listening to today. So I think it's always interesting when we do these exercises.
It is. It really is interesting, and there are other dynamics that come into play. And if you grew up in different parts of the country, or in different countries, it just exacerbates what can also already be difficult communication because the words now really mean something different. My daughter is a second grade school teacher. She has been a second grade school teacher for 7 or 8 years. Her husband was born in another country and he speaks 3 or 4 languages, and English is like his third or fourth language. And so they communicate. He speaks great English, but it's interesting how it adds some other dynamics because he'll say things and she's like, What did you mean by that? Tell me about that. And that, by the way, is such a great way to have a conversation. Say, well, tell me more about that. You said this. Tell me what that really means to you. Or when I say X, Y, and Z, tell me what that means to you. So listen, instead of assuming the words that are coming out on my mouth mean the same thing to you as they do to me, let's assume that maybe they don't, and have a little more conversation, a little more openness instead of frustration. Then the words mean different things. So really big thing to think about. The second idea we talked about is we said we were going to talk about HALT. Be very careful when, and David's going to walk us through this acronym of HALT.
Yeah, this is a very simple acronym, very simple and straightforward. And I have learned over the years that when I am in one of these four mental states, either one or a combination of all of them, when I'm one of these four mental states and physical states, that is not the time to make a decision. It's not a time to have what could be you need effective communication, and you could end up having destructive communication, right? So the word halt, never make a decision, never engage in communication when you first of all find yourself hungry. And we've all experienced this. This isn't anything new. If you don't believe that being hungry doesn't impact your decision making capabilities or your effective communication that works, just go to the grocery store at around 8 o'clock at night when you haven't eaten all day long. So when you walk in that grocery store, you're going to be hungry, right? And so because you're hungry, you buy everything that you see on the shelves rather than sticking to the list that is a grocery list. The second attribute we want people to understand is that when you're angry, when you're angry is not a good time to communicate. When you're angry is not a time to do effective decision making. And this angry component really comes into play in emails and texting, right? So angry, we understand face to face, but boy, how many times have we gotten ourselves in trouble because we received a text message and we responded with anger because we thought it was being given to us and anger. So never be involved in communication when you find yourself angry. Another one is lonely, right? So if you find yourself lonely, once again, kind of step back and say, okay, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is this really the best way to have this type of conversation? Is this really a good time for me to make this decision? So never engage in um, that communication that can be construed a thousand different ways when you're lonely. And then the last one is obviously when you're not tired. So when you're tired is not a good time. Kent actually alluded to the fact, right, that when it gets past 10:30 at night, um, he doesn't want to get involved in heavy communication, right? Because mistakes are going to be made. And I could tell you through our professional relationship that we had with each other over the years, I know if I text him back at 10:30, or if I text him at 10:30 night and say, "Hey, I have this idea," I know what he's going to say. He goes, "Hey, great, let's talk about it first thing in the morning." And so he does a really good job of making sure that if I'm tired, that is not a good time for me to be communicating, or it's not a time for me to be trying to do effective decision making. So, Kent, what would you add? You've heard me teach this over the years. Anything else that comes to mind?
The thing that comes to my mind is that we're not saying that just because you're hungry, angry, tired, lonely, that you can't talk to people and that things won't come up, but that you need to be careful, right? And if it's a situation where you know the person, it's a friend, a significant other, spouse, child, whatever else, those times you can say, hey, listen, I need to get something to eat. I need to chill out for a minute and whatever, and just tell them straight up, this is not a great time for me. Could we talk more about this later? If you're in the workplace and you don't want to be saying, hey, I'm really angry about this proposal that just went out, then what you might say, and David says this really well, is, can I think about that for a few minutes? Can you give me a few minutes to just process that and get back with you? I think so often in today's world, we're so used to quick, instant communication that we feel like we got to give an answer right away. And sometimes you have to, and we get that. But sometimes it's, can I think about that? Give me a chance to look at a couple things, whatever it is, right? So, really important that we give ourselves some space if we know we're probably not at our best, right? And sometimes you'll say, well, if you want me to make a decision, I can, but it'd probably be better if you gave me a little time to think about this or process, et cetera. We know you can't always do that. But what we're saying is in the majority of the cases, when you find yourself maybe not at your best, then see if you can kind of push off it to another time. Just some things to think about. Anything else with that, David?
No, that's it. No, I think we can move on. So that's good.
Great. So again, just warnings, right, for all of us. Here's the other thing we would add. When you fail, apologize quickly. You just say, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up, I blew that, I didn't do that as well as I should. And what's fascinating is this works very well, not just in personal relationships, but in professional relationships. We were doing some leadership development training at a very large hospital, medical center in Nashville, Tennessee a few years ago. And in that session, there was a leader from the Vanderbilt Medical School. And we were talking about this very thing. And this guy came up to me at one of the breaks and said, hey, let me show you some things we've done, some studies we've done about doctors making mistakes. And well, this is going to be interesting. And he said, we have found that when a doctor makes a mistake, if they will go to the patient or whomever it is and say, my apologies, I made this mistake. Here's how we're going to solve it. It's amazing how well that goes. In fact, he said that more than 90% of the time, the patient says, that's fine. Let's get it solved. But thank you for your honesty, for your communication with me, versus acting like nothing happened. It's not my fault. If David frustrates me about David says something that frustrates me, because he didn't frustrate me. I chose to get frustrated, right? But he frustrates me, and I say something I shouldn't say, and then later today or tomorrow, the next day, I say to David, hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have blown my stack and blown my top about that. But David, half of it was your fault. That never, ever works. It's not an apology. And there's an old saying that we've all heard many, many times before, and that is, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And when it comes to relationships, we're probably better off being happy, where we just kind of suck it up and say, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't do that well. And you know what? Maybe they're partially to blame as well. But trying to give an apology by getting an apology never works. Never works. They're thinking you are a two-faced. Well, I don't care for you at all. Whatever. What was that? I don't know. It's late in the day here that we're making this recording, so maybe my brain's not working as well as it should be. So the third thing we want to talk about, the last thing we'll talk about, is a tool that we call the conversation planner. And that conversation planner is a two-page document. On the left side, it has some ideas about balancing honesty and respect and integrity and some other things. But on the right 2/3, it says conversation purpose, and that's the part of the document that we're really going to focus on. Okay, the other part's pretty self-explanatory. And again, it's just two-page document, fill out. And what we're saying is, when you have some conversations you need to have that are really important, that there could be some misunderstanding, or you need to make sure everybody really is clear about what the expectations are, this can be really helpful to walk through this on your own before you have the conversation. In fact, one of our other sessions we'll talk about in the future is having a difficult conversation. How do you handle that with just 4 questions that we find to be very powerful? But this one is just about any kind of conversation. So as you are preparing the conversation, think to yourself, is this going to be new information you're giving people? Are you trying to persuade people of something? Are you trying to give them some policy information or an update to prior information? So think about what kind of communication is it, and who are the key participants who need to receive this communication? Really think through that. And how do you recognize whether the communication was successful or not? So if you think through this in advance, it can really help you think through how to have a more effective conversation, structuring an effective conversation. Now, we're not saying every time you talk to somebody, you got to sit down and do this. But again, remember, when they're kind of those important conversations, there might be some misunderstanding. There's some big changes. Don't assume, right? Now, same page of the document, when you are on the right side, is setting some expectations. And I really love this. I find this to be so helpful when I'm writing an email, even if I'm sending the text, certainly if I'm giving a presentation. And we call it know, do, feel. At the end of the conversation, at the end of the presentation, at the end of reading the email or reviewing the text, what is it you want people to know? Are there some specific things you want them to do? And how do you want them to feel? Feel excited, feel motivated, feel encouraged, right? Now, here's the thing. If you're not really clear in your own head about what you want them to know, what's the probability that they'll get all of it? If you're not really clear in your head and then clear in your presentation or a conversation about what you need them to do, I mean, think about how many times you've had a conversation with someone and they go, "So what does he want me to do? You know,
Yeah.
what do you want me to do about this?" You think, "Oh, I guess I should have said that, right?" And how do you want them to feel? Excited, motivated, encouraged, whatever it is, right? And again, you'll see on the left side, as expectation check, for you, is your point clearly expressed? Do I anticipate any resistance? And what are some barriers there might be to receiving this message? It's interesting. David tells a story about in our jobs, we've had, times where you needed to hire people and times you needed to let people go. And David, share with us that story you heard a long time ago when you first moved into a role where you were going to be hiring and letting people go.
I don't know, Kent. You're gonna have to remind me of
Sorry about
that.
that. That was a prime example of communication not going well. Yeah, so that's so great. This is a real good example. So the story where they talked about never fire somebody on what day of the week, that kind of thing.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, because I'm going like, okay,
This is great. This is perfect.
it's once again a classic Kent Vaughn curveball, right? So there you go. No, I mean one of the things that we know when it comes to that I learned very early on in my career, start off in human resources, and then transition in operations. Some basic fundamentals is that you never terminate somebody on a Friday. You give them the opportunity to go to the unemployment office, sign up for unemployment vis-a-vis online. Give them an opportunity to be able to do that during the week. Not don't fire them on Friday because you don't want them sitting at home over the weekend, just like totally lost of what they need to be doing. And that has always been a very great and effective communication tool that I've shared with people who've reported to me over the years. Is understand this is what we need to be doing. This is how we let somebody go. It is the best way to be effective in the communication without um, for no better choice of words, rooting the person's weekend. Give them some time to process it, and if they can't process it over the weekend, they need to be able to process that during the week.
Yeah, because if there's a question, they can call you. They can come to the
Right.
office. They can something. So well said. So well said. And and we all seen examples where people got fired on Christmas Eve. Like, really? Did you really
Yeah.
do that? I mean, wow, crazy stuff. Okay, the second page of this communication or conversation planner is just what you'd expect. As you're constructing the conversation, what's your intent? Make sure they understand what the intent is. Today, we're going to be talking about a change in a process. Today, I'm going to be introducing a new insurance plan. Today, we're talking about a proposal we need to put together for a client of ours. Today, we're going to, whatever, right? Declare your intent, what this is. What's the purpose of the conversation, the presentation, set some expectations, where we don't have all the answers, but I want to get this out so we can begin the conversations, and we'll have more information coming over the next few weeks. My main points are, and close with certainty. What's next? What are we doing next? Don't leave them wondering, well, now what? Now what do we do, right? This isn't difficult. It does take a few minutes to do it, a few moments. And remember, when you've got some really important conversations that need to happen, this is important. This is when we leave people hanging. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. In your life, when you didn't know what the next steps were, do we tend to go to positive or to go to negative? I think human nature is we tend to go negative. This isn't going well. There's a problem. They didn't tell us, so it must be getting worse. I mean, How often have you had that experience? And so what we don't want to is for people to naturally assume there's a problem. There may not be a problem at all, but
Mhm.
we need to be clear about what's next and when and so on and so forth. And if we commit to people that we're going to follow up with them by the end of the week about something, then we need to make sure we do that, even if it's just, hey, I haven't gotten the additional information I was expecting. I hope to get it at the beginning of the week, but just want to check in and let you know it's not like I've forgotten you. People never do well when we don't do what we said we would do, right? So
Mhm.
make sure you follow up and do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. How would you wrap this up, David?
So the way, yeah, I was actually thinking ahead, right? Because I knew you might ask that question. Um, think of how important it is for you to have uh, those conversations with your best customers, and how you don't want those conversations to go sideways. And so it's this is why this tool is so important, but not just to use this to customer, because the point I want to make is that just the same diligence that we have to make sure our conversations with customers go well, we should have that same diligence, and actually even more diligence, to have that level of conversation with our coworkers, our team members, our peers, our family members. So let me really encourage you to take the time to use this tool, map out your conversation, and you will be setting yourself up for success rather than potentially setting yourself up for failure by not using the tool. So that's the way that I will close this video out, Kent.
Excellent. So, what I ask you to think about as we wrap up. Sorry, there knocked my computer there. As we wrap this up, think about how are you going to apply this? Personally, professionally, avocationally, whatever roles you have, whatever it is you do, how will you apply this? And are there some conversations that have not gone well that you need to go back and do something about? Uh, Conversations that don't go well don't tend to get better with age. So, go back and if you need to solve some situations, then go solve them, right? But, uh, you know, it's amazing what people will do when they trust our intent. Our intent's to
Yep. Yeah.
communicate well. They trust us, and like if you have a conversation with somebody that you trust a lot and they trust you, it's amazing how you can use a lot of shorthand and you don't need to necessarily do all of these things, right? But even then, when they're kind of thorny issues, it doesn't hurt to be a little more prepared, right? And
Right.
so we'll talk more in a future session about trust and how we can improve that and how we can earn it when there have been difficulties. But for now, we just want to thank you for being with us. Hope you found this to be a very valuable session. Have a great day and good luck.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks.